Hello, and welcome to Strategic Leadership with Paul Gilbert. I am so excited about this episode. I have an amazing guest speaker for us. But let's talk just a minute, as we do at the beginning of every episode, about why we have this channel. This channel focuses on strategy and leadership and management issues. And the reason we talk about these is if you are with an organization that has a mission, a product, a service that is important, that's going to change the world, that's going to do good things, you can't leave it to chance. You have to be absolutely engaged in learning and growing and being the best organization you can be. That's what all the great organizations have done. And that's what we're going to try to move today with this great conversation. So let me introduce Michael Useem. I have known Mike now for about a decade, and he's one of the top business professors in the country. He's a management professor at the Wharton School of Business. He is the director of the Center for Leadership and Change Management. What a cool sounding title that is. The McNulty Leadership Program. He's the director for that. Michael, welcome to the channel, and thank you so much for giving of your time today as we talk about your latest book.
Paul, it's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to work with you. We go back a couple of years. We spent a day on the Gettysburg battlefield. I have followed what you've been doing, so I genuinely look forward to our dialogue.
Absolutely. So today we are going to be talking about this great new book that has come out called The Edge, and it's a remarkable book. And Mike, I think you've written 12 books. Did I count right, or did I miss a few?
No, that's about right.
About right. Pretty amazing. This book is focused on leadership, and it covers 9, I'll say, modern CEOs and George Washington. And I was telling my wife about reading this book, and I said, 9 CEOs and George Washington. I said, there's a reason I like this guy. And I've got a book next to my recliner on the American Revolution that I'm reading right now. So, and I always interested in leadership advice. And the way I got associated with Mike was a number of years ago. I took an executive ed class that he had called The Leadership Journey. That was just a remarkable week-long immersive experience where we went to Gettysburg at the end of the week and really looked at how the events of 150 some years ago could relate to all of the modern study of leadership that we were immersed in. So,
yeah, Paul, just to jump in on that, you make a great implicit point, which is we don't want to relive the past. We don't want to do what we're doing now because of the past, but it is amazing what we can learn from the past, in that sometimes, just to put a phrase in front of us here, looking really far away from home can provide piercing insights into what is at home in the way that almost nothing else can. And in fact, that's the underlying idea behind the whole book, which is to look at others, to look at ourselves.
So Michael, one of the great things that you have is access to all of these remarkable leaders of our time. And so you had, firsthand experience with all but George Washington. And just tell me a little bit about how you came to interact with all these folks. You mentioned Jeff Lurie, the president or the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles. You wrote about the owner. We rarely focus on the owners of major sports teams as real cutting edge leaders, but he was doing some great stuff. So you had interesting choices in your.
Yeah. Gaining access to the people who run, for example, we have the chief executive and also the executive chair of the Estee Lauder companies, the maker of products that everybody will know at the local department store, cosmetics, kind of upscale cosmetics. I've concluded that so much happens behind closed doors when it comes to understanding their leadership or how it's enacted, that I really had to set out to see if I couldn't sit down with them and asked for for example, give me an example of a very tough decision. What went into it? What did you do? How did you get people to follow it? And I scour the media, but I usually get stuck. And so it's not enough out there in the public domain. So for this book in particular, I made a point to go inside the corner office and spend some time. A person I came to know who is the chief executive of Progressive Corporation. Most people know it as Progressive Insurance, but having come to know Patricia Griffith is the name of the chief executive officer, I simply sent an email message. She goes by Trish. I said, Trish, I'm working on how people like you make decisions in the high office at the very top of the high tower. And I said, is there a chance I could fly out to Cleveland, which is where this company is located, or near Cleveland, and just tag along for much of a day? I'm a bundle of questions. And she said, sure, come on out. So took a flight out. Next thing I know, I'm going into an event with her, which was extremely instructive, not just to be told about it, but actually just see her in action. I've done the same thing with the chief executive of Johnson & Johnson, for example, Alex Gorski, much in the news at the moment because J&J is in the vaccine business. Everybody knows that. And so the basic idea was to spend time with the person, to dialogue. They allowed me to ask some very tough questions, but also to watch them in action. And with that, my conclusion is, and this is the title of the book, The Edge, what worked for them 5 or 10 years ago. Some of them have been in office for 10 years in some cases. What worked for them now that is not working for them still? And what are the leadership skills they're going to need or are already acquiring that they will have to have in the next 5 or 10 years? So the edge is where we are right now. We are a product of our past. We lead with past wisdom, but I think we're going to fail in my case, our students. In your case, those who are visiting parks in Northern Virginia. In the case of Johnson & Johnson, those who are looking for hip transplants. We're going to fail them if we think what we've got right now is the leadership without the edge of looking at what kind of leadership we need for the next 5 or 10 years. So that was typically the final question I'd have. Okay, thank you for helping me understand what you've done. Let's talk about what you're going to need over the next 5 years. Sorry to go on so long about that, but let me, Paul, just conclude with the original George Washington. And the reason I brought him into the book is I could find no better example in history, but there are many people that have been through something comparable to a person who took on a calling that at the time seemed way above his pay grade, if you will. So the Continental Congress, you will call, unanimously elected George Washington, who had had very little military experience. He'd served in the British Army for 5 years, very little schooling, had dropped out, I think it was in 4th or 5th grade, but seemed to be the man of the moment to indeed take charge of the Continental Army that had formed after the events of Lexington and Concord back in 1775. George Washington confided to a couple people in letters, this is way over my head. I've never led an army. I've led some units of a fraction of the size. But the Continental Congress has asked me to do what I'm going to do, so I have to do it. And I guess I'm going to have to learn on the job. So he arrives in Boston, takes charge of the Continental Army that had not been an army at all. A lot of Minutemen kind of just camping out on what they call the commons there in Cambridge next to Boston. And he said, hey guys, I'm your new commanding officer. And they said, hey, what? We don't have a commanding officer. So he had to overcome that. And then he had to get the British out of Boston. The British were extremely well equipped. Boston was extremely well fortified. And at the time, Boston was almost an island. It had a small connecting, what they called neck, to the mainland, but they had the defensive water on basically 4/5 of the sides of the of downtown Boston. So he came up with a number of ideas as the leader now of the Continental Army on how to dislodge the British, to bring the revolution forward, to ultimately make America an independent nation. And his top three people said, George, that idea, this idea, number one, it's dumb. And he said, really? I'm the general officer here, and you're telling me my idea is dumb? And they said, yes. He listened. He didn't pursue that idea. Came up with a couple more, including one to put his own soldiers on ice skates to go across the frozen water surrounding Boston during the winter. You can see where that might go wrong. What happened to the far side in ice skates? That was rejected, and ultimately he did come up with a solution. So in his early years as the commanding officer, wonderful that he was willing to step forward at one of the most important times in our own history. And he stepped forward without a whole lot of leadership experience, certainly in arms. But 7 years later, there is a British surrender at Yorktown. The revolution comes to an end on American terms. The Treaty of Paris 2 years later makes America an independent country. And that's partly because George Washington, this is why it's all about the edge, came with a set of skills that got him the job, but knew he had to have a much bigger leadership skill set if he was going to pursue the revolution. And then, of course, there's a whole story about his service as president. But that is the edge.
Yeah.
You've been given the office. You can't do it like the person before you, but you simply now, as a incumbent person with some leadership, it doesn't have to be big, it could be a small title. Don't forget to take what you know and learn what you still need to know to make the difference in the years ahead.
Michael, those are such great tenets to bring forward, and they come through loud and clear in your book. And Michael, you've done such a brilliant job of that in your new book, The Edge. I encourage everyone out there to pick up a copy. You will, without any doubt, pick up numerous insights that you never had before. You'll learn about a wide cross section of some of the best companies in America today, and you'll learn it from one of the top business professors in the world today, from the Wharton School of Business, who's just everyone and have all these amazing insights and access to leaders. So thank you so much for honoring me, for honoring our listeners in sharing your insights today.
Paul, thank you for honoring me. It's been a genuine honor to use that term a second time, to be on the program with you. We've worked together over the years. It's been wonderful to have a conversation. I wish you and the viewers or the listeners very well with their own leadership. That's the game we're in, and let's hope we can get it right.
Great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. For all of you that have tuned into this episode and gotten some good insights, make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, and share it. Copy the link, send it to your friends, send it to others that are working on their leadership journey too. It's a journey for everyone. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Paul.